Get out, little girl. This stage isn't for cleaners' kids. The final note of the evening wasn't music. It was the sound of a heavy iron door closing. A thick, cold, proud door, like a dream Amira Lewis, only 8 years old, had never dared believe belonged to her. Evening fell slowly on the scorched fields of Silver Lake, a quiet little town nestled in Central California where summer didn't carry the scent of the sea but the dry breath of dust, where sunlight didn't glitter but burned like a branding iron, a place where a brown-skinned child with bare feet could grow up without ever hearing a round of applause meant for someone like her. Amira was the daughter of a woman with no photograph in any family album. Her mother had died when Amira was just 3, on a rainy night that swallowed her name and left Amira in the care of her grandmother, Clara Lewis, a woman who had once been a nurse, then a janitor, and now pushed trash bins after every performance at the Grand Silver Lake Music Festival. Everyone in town knew Clara, Hunchback Lewis, they whispered, as the quiet woman who rolled away the world's waste at the end of each day. And beside her, always, was a shadow, a small figure named Amira, often seen curled up in the back row of the festival hall, sketching piano keys into a tattered notebook like a child mapping the path home. That year, the Silver Lake Festival was larger than ever. A brand new sound system towered over the main stage. Spectator seats filled from the lawn to the surrounding hills. But all eyes were drawn to the true queen of the stage, a gleaming Steinway & Sons grand piano, perched on polished pine wood like a jewel in a crown. Amira watched it for hours, hidden behind stage curtains. She watched hands dance across its keys, memorizing every movement. She didn't need sheet music, didn't need a teacher. She watched and remembered every scale, every chord, as though her memory had been carved for this, and this alone. One late afternoon, while workers cleaned the stage and her grandmother was scrubbing the VIP seating, Amira inched closer to the piano. Small as a feather, silent as dusk, she stood near the Steinway, eyes wide and heart trembling. Just one more step. Her fingers quivered. She glanced around. No one was looking. Just a touch, she whispered to herself. Just one touch. That's all. Then came the voice. Get out, little girl. This stage isn't for cleaners, kids. It snapped like a whip. A tall man in a security uniform, chest like a wall, towered over her. He stormed forward, boots loud against the hollow stage floor. Who gave you permission to be near this? He barked. Before Amira could speak, another voice cut in, high and mocking, from a sound technician testing the mic. Whose kid is that? What kind of child shows up dressed like that and dares touch a Steinway? These are professional instruments, not toys for staff brats. Amira didn't cry, didn't speak. She just looked at the guard, then at the piano, as if the whole world had drawn a line and she, barefoot, still wished to cross it. That night, Clara didn't say much. She packed their things in silence. The cleaning cart rattled against the wooden floor as they left. Amira followed, steps small and soft, each one sounding like a note of shame. When they returned to the staff quarters, a cramped room tucked behind the stadium where they sometimes slept, Clara peeled off her gloves slowly. Amira, you can't go near that stage again. You understand? Why not? Because they don't want us there. But I only wanted to look. Looking doesn't cost anything. Clara stared at her for a long while, her eyes tired, heavy. The world out there, sweetie, it isn't always ready for poor folks to dream. Especially not dreams that make noise. Amira turned away. She didn't cry, but her hands balled into fists, as if holding invisible keys she refused to release. Later that night, after Clara fell asleep, Amira slipped from her cot. Barefoot, quiet, she crept down the corridor. The stage hall was dark, the power cut for the night. A faint exit sign glowed dim green across the floorboards. The heavy door to the main hall hadn't been locked yet. Amira pushed it gently. Creak. She stepped in, silent, a shadow among shadows. There it was, the Steinway, majestic even in the dark, waiting like an unopened letter. She sat at the bench. She didn't need light. She didn't need permission. She didn't need anyone. Her tiny hands hovered over the keys. And then they played. Not a song from the radio, not from a book. Something her own. A melody quiet and aching, but not hopeless. Like wind through dry grass. Like her mother's breath when she used to sleep beside her. Like a lullaby that had never been sung aloud. Suddenly, a sound. A cough. A shuffle of footsteps behind her. Amira froze. A figure emerged from the shadows. Elderly, slightly hunched. A cane tapping softly with each step. He wore a worn baseball cap and had a silver beard that caught the exit light like frost on old stone. "Don't stop," he said, voice rough but warm. "You've already woken the ghosts in this place." Amira swallowed hard. "I didn't know anyone was listening." "I was. And so was the piano. Where'd you learn that?" "Nowhere. I just watch and play." "Self-taught," the man huffed, lowering himself onto the front row seat. "I was a sax player once, jazz band, New Orleans circuit, before I lost my wife, lost the sound in me too. I'm Amira. Call me Mr. Evans, or just Harold. Doesn't matter." From that night on, Harold Evans became the keeper of Amira's secret. Each night as Clara slept, Amira would return to the dark hall, and Harold would meet her, cane in hand, sitting quietly as she played. He taught her not just how to play, but how to listen. How silence between notes mattered as much as the notes themselves. How music wasn't just sound, but soul. And how jazz, real jazz, wasn't learned. It was survived. He didn't praise her much, didn't smile often. But when she finished a song, he would nod, then say just one thing: "You're getting closer." The next day, Amira returned to her usual spot, back row, invisible, watching musicians rehearse for the festival. She didn't interrupt, didn't speak. No one noticed the little girl in the frayed coat, miming the chords with her fingers mid-air, memorizing every bar. But one man did, Harold Evans, watching from afar, hand pressed lightly over his heart where her music had started playing again. The door had been slammed shut the day before. But that night, somewhere in the dark, music opened something deeper. Some doors don't need keys. They need courage. Amira said it under a moonlit sky, not in anger, not in sorrow. Just a truth, quiet and steady, like the sound of a leaf falling. Harold Evans paused mid-tap. He had been keeping rhythm on the armrest of a seat, but the words froze him. He looked at the little girl sitting at the Steinway in the middle of the empty hall, her back straight, her shoulders small, her hair tied unevenly. Her tiny fingers barely touched the keys, as if trying to soothe an old wound the world had forgotten. "Don't you have a home to go to?" he asked gently. "I have my grandma, but she's afraid I'll get hurt. So sometimes she locks up my dream to keep it safe." She wasn't blaming anyone. She was just describing. Like she understood, grown-ups, once broken too many times by the world, learned to protect love by hiding it away, locking the dream in a drawer and swallowing the key. Amira played by memory. and her memory was unlike anyone else's. She didn't remember lyrics like other children. She remembered harmony, chord progressions, bridges, modulations, after hearing a piece just once. One evening, Harold played a complex jazz recording by Bill Evans, rapid modulations, offbeat phrasing, altered chords. Less than an hour later, Amira replayed most of it by heart, adding delicate left-hand flourishes that weren't there originally. "You changed it?" Harold asked, stunned. "I just thought it would sound sadder that way." She wasn't copying. She was feeling. Maybe because her world was made of unfinished sounds, the buzz of IV pumps, whispered codes over hospital intercoms, wind slipping through broken windows, her brain learned to listen deeper, to feel beyond the surface. Harold Evans had once been a saxophonist in New Orleans, playing smoky clubs where music bled like prayer. Then came a car accident, a broken spine, a wife who grew sick. A life slowly reduced to silence. He'd taught music in a Texas high school once, but after she passed, he drifted, and finally took a quiet job as night security at Silver Lake Festival, where no one asked about who he used to be. Until he heard an 8-year-old girl playing a complex piece in the dark, without looking at the keys. "Where did you learn?" he asked. Amira lowered her head. Such a simple question. But for her it carried weight. She hadn't learned anywhere. She'd never owned a piano. Everything she knew came from watching rehearsal bands, eavesdropping on performers, and sketching out imagined pianos on paper. She'd tap on cardboard, on her thighs, on the air, until her brain heard what wasn't there. "I once drew all 88 keys on paper and taped them to the wall. Played every night with my fingers in the air." Harold said nothing for a while. One night he brought her an old, worn book. The real book. A sacred text among jazz players. The pages were yellow, corners dog-eared, margins scribbled with faded ink. Amira held it like treasure. She couldn't read every chord symbol at first, but she could feel the shape of the melody just by looking at the score. Slowly, Harold taught her the language. CMAJ 7, BM 75, swing rhythm, modal interchange, 2 VI progressions. "This is your frame," he said, pointing to the chords. "But your soul, that's the color inside the lines." Amira nodded. "Then I'll play with all of me." "Like you do." Another evening, she played Autumn Leaves, then paused halfway through. Her fingers hovered, still. "This part, falling leaves drift by the window. I hear my mom in that line, right before the last breath." She didn't cry. She didn't need pity. It was just how she remembered, how she survived. By turning pain into melody, by turning loss into a single soft note. In time, Harold discovered something else. Amira didn't just memorize, she composed. She had started writing short melodies, repeating phrases that evolved subtly, like echoes moving through a canyon. When Harold asked why she never wrote them down, Amira shook her head. "I'm scared that if I write it, it'll disappear." Disappear? The feeling. Because when I write, I'm sad. And sadness doesn't happen twice the same way. Harold sat back, stunned. It felt like he wasn't talking to a child anymore, but to an old musician weathered by life. One time, he challenged her. "Rearrange Amazing Grace, but only with your left hand." Amira sat quietly for half an hour. Then she played. Notes, low, staggered, trembling, like the footfalls of a blind man walking through an empty church. No one could have guessed it came from a single hand, and such a small one. Harold exhaled. "If the world were fair, you'd already be at Juilliard." Amira looked up, not sad, just honest. "If the world were fair, My mom wouldn't have died because we couldn't pay the bills. Clara, the only adult in the shadows, was growing more worried. She didn't hear the piano, but she saw the light in Amira's eyes. Brighter, braver, hopeful. And Clara knew, hope, when not protected, is the first thing the world crushes. "Mr. Evans, please," she begged one night. "Stop this. She's a poor little brown girl with nothing. No money, no school. This will break her." "Clara," Harold replied, "your granddaughter already survived a kind of pain that took me down at 50. She doesn't need to dream. She's already alive." One night, Amira asked, "Mr. Evans, what if they really did stop me from playing someday?" Harold didn't answer right away. He stood slowly, walked to the piano, and placed his hand gently on the lid. "When my wife died, I threw my saxophone into the river. Thought I buried the dream forever. And then? Then 30 years later, I heard you. And the dream came back." He looked at her, his eyes glistening. "If they ever stop you, Amira, close your eyes, tap your knees, tap your chest, tap the air, because dreams, real ones, don't live in places. They live in people who won't let go." That night, Amira played something with no title, soft, slow, as if each note were a memory made of silk. Harold whispered, "Do you know who you sound like right now?" Amira shook her head. "You sound like someone who's already gone, but wants the living to hear." "Who is that girl?" "She's the janitor's granddaughter." Dear God, what did she just play? That morning began like every other. The sun glared down harshly through the cheap plastic tarps of Silver Lake Festival, the air thick and dusty, the scent of hot plastic rising from the stage floor. But backstage, beneath the surface of the usual noise, a quiet panic had begun to spread like wildfire. Daniel Cross, the lead pianist of the world-renowned band The Arrows, had been rushed to the hospital. Severe food poisoning, high fever, dehydration, mild seizures. Doctors said he needed at least 3 days to recover, which meant one thing: he wouldn't be able to perform tomorrow night during the festival's most anticipated show. Victor Hale, leader of the Arrows and contract representative for the festival, slammed his phone onto the table. His coffee spilled across the stage lighting diagram. "No, not now, not this show. Daniel is the backbone. Everything builds around his keys." An assistant cautiously offered, "We could bring in a pianist from L.A.? Victor turned, eyes sharp. "You don't swap out your spine with a substitute from Craigslist. The audience didn't pay thousands to hear some nobody butcher Midnight Arrows." Silence settled in the room. Heavy, tense, frantic. Meanwhile, just a few steps down the hallway, an 8-year-old girl stood still against the wall, listening. Her heart thudded like a drum. Amira. And for the first time in her life, she felt that a door, just slightly, was ajar. She didn't understand every word of the conversation, but she understood enough. Daniel Cross was out, and the band was desperate. And she, Amira Lewis, knew every song the Arrows had ever performed. Not just by memory, but note for note, down to the improvisational accents Daniel used on stage. No one knew. Except Mr. Harold and Grandma Clara, pushing a cleaning cart down the far hallway. That evening, Amira clutched her notebook, a worn pad with hand-drawn piano keys, scribbled harmonies, and melody fragments only she could interpret. She waited until the rehearsal space emptied, then approached Harold Evans. "Mr. Evans, if they really need someone to replace Daniel, should I offer?" The old man studied her face. Slowly he replied, "Amira, this might hurt." "Music already saved me," she said. "I'm not afraid of pain anymore." The next day at noon, as Victor Hale argued with festival directors over the prospect of postponing the performance, a small shadow stepped into the artist's tent. A staff member moved quickly to block her. "Restricted area. Step back." Amira lifted her chin. Her voice was soft but unwavering. "I'd like to audition to replace Daniel." The room froze. Victor turned, blinked once. "Excuse me? I can play all of the Arrow songs. I don't need sheet music." "And you are?" "Amira. I'm the janitor's granddaughter." The silence that followed was bone deep. Then, laughter. Sharp, cruel, Victor's own. "A janitor's child? 8 years old? Wants to sit at Daniel Cross's piano? This is the comedy of the century." The mood in the tent turned sour. A few people muttered. One of the guitarists turned his back. A sound tech scoffed under his breath. Victor stepped forward, leaned down eye to eye. "Do you even know that Midnight Arrows modulates in the 3rd minute and 18 seconds? Or that Silver Echo switches to 7/8 during the bridge?" "Yes, sir," Amira replied. Daniel usually accents the A-ass in the second pass. It creates a layered echo effect. That's where the name comes from. Victor blinked. Around him, a few crew members raised their eyebrows. That level of detail wasn't common knowledge. "All right," Victor said coldly. "Let her try." "Practice piano in the back storage room. No mics. Let's see what fantasy sounds like when it falls." They led Amira to a dim room off the side of the stage. An upright piano sat against the wall, out of tune, ignored. The lights were off. No audience. Just Victor, a few skeptical crew members, a guitarist, and in the doorway, Mr. Harold, silent as a statue. Amira sat at the bench, took a deep breath. Her hands trembled for a moment, but only at first. Then they moved, not as if playing, but as if telling a story her heart had waited years to speak. She opened with an original piece, 3 simple chords repeated in haunting variations, not to impress, but to reveal. Her fingers painted sorrow, dignity, and something like prayer. Then came Silver Echo. She didn't just play it, she transformed it. The most difficult arrangement in the Arrows catalog became a whisper between jazz and gospel. Fast sections soared like birds in flight. Slow ones felt like the last breath of someone letting go. The room was silent, frozen. Victor stood still. A technician whispered, "Dear God, what did she just play?" A sound engineer covered his mouth, and Harold Evans, his face wet with tears, leaned softly against the wall. Victor stepped forward, stared at Amira. Then, suddenly, "I get it now. This girl's been sneaking into the hall and playing at night. Someone saw her. She's been stealing our music. Probably recording it." Shock rippled through the room. Amira's smile faded. "No, I didn't." "Enough," Victor snapped. "This is copyright violation. No one plays like that without stealing." Security was called. Clara arrived just in time. She rushed forward and wrapped her arms around her granddaughter. "Please don't hurt her. She's just a child." "A dishonest child," Victor said flatly. Mr. Harold stepped forward, his cane echoing through the silence. "I taught her." There were no recordings, no theft, only a piano, a child, and a heart that listens. Victor didn't answer, but the room began to divide. "She's a prodigy. She did play it. Even if it's crazy, she can do it." Amira and Clara were escorted out of the artist tent. Amira didn't cry. She held her grandmother's hand. Clara whispered, "Are you all right, baby?" Amira simply replied, "Music is the truth, and the truth deserves to be heard." She's just the janitor's kid. She doesn't belong here. But the music said otherwise. That night, the internet burned with whispers. But inside the world of Amira Lewis, everything felt still. She sat beside her grandmother in the tiny storage room behind the stadium, where the cleaning crew kept spare uniforms and bins of old wires. Her knees were drawn to her chest. Her notebook lay open on the floor, but she didn't write. Not yet. Outside that room, the world was deciding who she was, but inside, Amira was still only a little girl who had played the truth. The next morning, Victor Hale made his move. He called a press briefing at the media tent, inviting festival sponsors and a few selected journalists. He spoke with polished calm. Due to recent events, we want to clarify that no unauthorized performer will be allowed on stage. This is not a place for your casual hobbyists or untrained individuals. A journalist asked, "Are you referring to the young girl who played yesterday?" Victor smiled tightly. "She is not a musician. She is the granddaughter of a janitor. That's all." The next moment was quiet, until someone in the back, a younger journalist, stood up. "I saw her play. I recorded it." Victor froze. "She played your arrangement of Silver Echo perfectly." "She didn't miss a single modulation." Victor's face hardened. "That recording is unauthorized and must be deleted." But it was too late. Her name was Sophie Grant, a freelance culture reporter from Sacramento. She had recorded Amira's performance and the brutal aftermath on her phone, unnoticed. That night, she uploaded the video with one caption, #Let Amira Play. The internet did not whisper anymore. It roared. Overnight, the video received 500,000 views. By morning, jazz musicians from New York commented, "She's real. Listen to her phrasing." Music teachers reposted with tears, "This girl plays like she remembers something we all forgot." Activists asked, "Why is a child punished for being gifted?" Retired festival goers wrote, "We would pay to hear her play again." But it wasn't just praise. Criticism came too. "This is a professional festival. We don't bend for pity. A stage isn't a charity. You don't let a child set a precedent. There are rules." The festival board was torn. Sponsors began to call. Some supported Amira. Others threatened to pull out if a random street child was allowed on stage. Inside the cleaning room, Clara clutched her phone, eyes trembling. "Amira, they're fighting. Over you." Amira didn't look up. "It's not about me, Grandma. It's about the piano, and who they think deserves to touch it." In the middle of the storm, Daniel Cross, the original pianist, sent a voice message to the festival director. Weak, his voice hoarse from the hospital bed, but firm. "I don't know what happened, but if that girl really played my parts like people say, let her play. She earned it." Backstage, the whispers grew louder. The technical crew, most of whom had seen Amira's audition, began to shift sides. The lighting designer told one staffer, "I've seen child prodigies. She's not mimicking. She's composing as she plays." "That's rare." Even some of the performers approached Victor quietly. "Let her open for 5 minutes. Let the audience decide." But Victor did not bend. Instead, he made a public statement. "We are not a circus. We do not hand stages to the unqualified, regardless of online pressure." And then, the final blow. He ordered the security team to remove Amira and Clara from festival grounds. They were escorted out that evening. No force, no yelling. But Clara's shoulders trembled as she held Amira close. Before stepping past the final gate, Amira turned back one last time, toward the lights of the stage she had once touched. Across town, in a nursing clinic room where Mr. Harold Evans was resting due to fatigue and high blood pressure, the nurse brought him a tablet. "You might want to see this," she said. He watched the video. His own voice could be faintly heard in the background of the clip, whispering encouragement as Amira played. And then he saw Victor's response to it all, the slander, the dismissal. Harold's eyes narrowed. He reached for the landline beside the bed. "Call the festival board," he told the nurse. "And tell them, if that girl doesn't play, I'm going public with everything I've seen." The next day, a petition started by Sophie Grant reached 150,000 signatures. Then something unexpected happened. A jazz legend, Isabella Cruz, posted, "When I was 12, I was laughed off a stage in Chicago because I played barefoot. A year later, I was headlining that same venue. Let the girl play." Her post was shared by dozens of other musicians. Now it wasn't about a child pianist. It was about who had the right to be heard. Victor Hale was cornered. His PR team told him his brand was collapsing. Sponsors threatened to walk not because of Amira, but because of his arrogance. And then came the final push. Daniel Cross, now stable, went on live stream. "Let's be honest. I'd be proud to play beside her. She's not a threat. She's the truth." The festival board overruled Victor. They offered Amira a spot, a small one, just a 5-minute opening set before the main act. That night, in the same dusty storage room where she had cried just days ago, Amira stood up, her back straight. Her eyes shone, not with pride, but with quiet fire. "I won't just play," she said. "I'll speak, through the keys." Clara held her close. "Even if they mock you again, baby, then I'll play until they fall silent." And so, after public shaming, accusation, and exile, the child they had called the janitor's kid was walking toward the stage. Her dress was simple, her shoes worn, but her hands were made of music. She's only 8, but when she plays, the room forgets her age and remembers its soul. The stage smelled like sawdust and metal, not the polished scent of elegance, but something raw and lived in. The piano, black, gleaming, enormous, waited silently in the center. Cables wound like vines across the floor. A tech crew whispered in the wings. Somewhere above, an overhead light buzzed faintly, like a breath held in tension. And just beyond the stage curtains, Amira Lewis, 8 years old, waited. Her hands were clean, her nails clipped, her shoes were scuffed. Her dress, a faded cream color, had once belonged to Clara when she was a child. It didn't fit perfectly, but it carried the scent of someone who had always chosen dignity, even in the face of disregard. A woman from the festival board knelt beside her. "It's just 5 minutes, sweetheart. If you get scared, you can stop any time." Amira nodded. She wasn't scared. Not of the piano, not of the stage. She had played for no one, in the dark. Now she would play for 20,000 in the light. It was the same music, only now the world had decided it was worth listening to. Harold Evans wasn't at the festival that evening. He was resting in his room, hooked to an IV drip. But he had given the nurses one instruction: turn the television on, loud, and tell the others to hush when the girl comes on. He lay back, eyes open, hands folded across his chest like he was praying. Backstage, Victor Hale stood in the shadows, arms crossed. He hadn't said a word since the board's decision. Not to the press, not to the band, not to Amira. But when she walked past him toward the stage, their eyes met. There was no hatred, just something colder. A silence that said, "Prove it." The host introduced her with the warmth of someone trying to balance PR and disbelief. "Ladies and gentlemen, we begin tonight's performance with someone very special. Please welcome Amira Lewis." There was polite applause, scattered, confused. But then Amira walked out. Tiny, straight-backed, not waving, She didn't bow. She didn't speak. She walked to the Steinway, sat down and placed both hands gently on the keys. The lights dimmed, and the room fell silent. She began with a piece she had never written down. No one else had ever played it. A composition for someone she could no longer touch. Her mother. The opening chords were soft, minor, a slow heartbeat. Then a melody, like a voice humming from behind a wall just out of reach. Each note carried weight, grief, longing, memory. It wasn't sad in the way music sometimes tries to be. It was real sadness, the kind that doesn't shout, but settles deep in the bones. Halfway through the piece, she let the left hand fall into silence, letting the right hand carry the voice alone. Just one melody. Like one child, searching through the dark for someone who never answered back. An old man in the second row began to cry. He wasn't sure why. Only that the sound reminded him of holding his sister's hand when she died in 1956. He hadn't remembered that day in 60 years. Until now. When the last note faded, the room was still. No clapping. Not yet. Just breath. Held. Eyes. Wet. Time. Paused. And then she began again. This time she played the Arrows' music. But it wasn't imitation. It was transformation. She took Midnight Arrows, a brooding jazz fusion anthem, and slowed it down, weaving gospel and classical voicings into its spine. She shifted keys, altered the phrasing, and turned a song of swagger into something like worship, a kind of reimagining that only someone untouched by rules could dare to make. She wasn't just playing their music. She was answering it, rewriting it, owning it. The band, watching from the side, looked at Victor. For the first time, he didn't look back. He was watching the piano. His jaw clenched, his throat moved, his arms slowly unfolded. And then, Amira did something no one expected. She looked up and smiled. Not for applause, not for attention, but because, for the first time, she knew they were finally hearing the truth. As she finished, there was a pause, a long, full pause. And then the room rose. 20,000 people, standing. They didn't scream. They didn't cheer. They stood, in silence, in reverence. The applause came seconds later, like a wave delayed by awe. And when it did not stop. People in the far hills of the lawn stood. Technicians stood. Cameramen wept. Even Victor Hale stood. Back at the clinic, Harold Evans tapped the bed 3 times with his hand. "That's it," he whispered. "That's the sound." She found it. Clara was waiting just off stage. When Amira returned, she didn't rush into her arms. She simply placed her small hand into Clara's larger, calloused one. "Did I do okay?" she asked. Clara didn't answer. She only bent down, and for the first time in years, kissed her granddaughter on the forehead. "You didn't play like a child," she whispered. "You played like someone who's lived 100 lives." The festival board scrambled to issue a public apology. Their press release called Amira an extraordinary young talent and an unexpected gift. They promised to support her future. The Arrows, humbled, extended an offer for her to join them as a guest artist in future tours. Victor didn't attend the press briefing. He left the festival early. Some say he went back to his house in Colorado. Others say he stood outside the hall that night, hidden among the trees, listening to her encore. But Amira declined the band's invitation. When asked why, she simply said, "I still have school, and there are other kids like me, who've been playing in the dark. Someone has to go back and find them." The next month, with help from the festival board and a handful of donors moved by her performance, A new fund was created. The Light. We Play, a music scholarship and outreach program for underprivileged children, especially those from working-class families, immigrant communities, and children of janitors, farmers, and cooks. Its first piano was donated by a retired jazz musician from Louisiana. Its second came from Victor Hale, anonymously. On opening day of the first community music class, Amira stood beside Clara and Harold, now walking slowly but upright again. She placed her hand on the new piano, nodded, and sat down. A dozen children sat in a circle around her, eyes wide, hearts open. "Okay," she smiled. "Let's begin. You don't need to know notes. Just close your eyes and listen." They tried to lock the piano, but the song got out. 3 days after the performance, Amira returned to being a child. She brushed her teeth without being told. She helped Clara fold laundry in the back room of the church where they were temporarily staying. She watered plants that weren't hers. She hummed new songs into the dusty corners of her grandmother's cleaning closet, and sometimes laughed when no one was watching. But outside that quiet room, a digital wildfire was raging. The video of her performance, recorded from a shaky phone by someone on the lawn, had been uploaded just hours after the show ended. The description read, "8-year-old janitor's granddaughter stuns 20,000 with original piece plus jazz gospel fusion. No formal training. Watch to the end." The video had 800,000 views by dawn. By noon, 7 million. By nightfall, it was trending in 43 countries. The hashtags bloomed like wildflowers in a forgotten garden. #Let Amira Play, #Janitor's Kid, #The Little Pianist, #Soul on 88 Keys. Music has no class. On the second day, she was invited to appear on 3 morning talk shows. Clara declined them all. "She's not a guest, she's a student. Let her breathe." But the world didn't want to let go. Dozens of reaction videos filled YouTube. Opera singers crying, jazz musicians replaying her finger technique in slow motion, music theorists breaking down her voicings frame by frame. One conservatory professor from Boston posted a video titled, "I've taught for 32 years. This girl just reminded me why." Yet with every wave of love came the undertow. On a forum for classical musicians, an anonymous account wrote, "Cute story, but let's be honest. She'll never survive a real conservatory. No theory, no training, just vibes. It's dangerous to give untrained kids this kind of attention." Some whispered darker things. "Where's her father? They're exploiting her. Watch, she'll burn out by 12. Victor Hale never made a public statement, but a leaked email suggested he had called the board's decision a populist disaster. Clara kept Amira shielded from most of it. They unplugged the old TV in the church basement. Turned off the radio. Clara's flip phone rang constantly. Reporters, agents, distant cousins, and strangers who claimed to be moved and connected. She declined every call, until she got one from a familiar voice. "This is Daniel Cross." That evening, Daniel visited quietly. No cameras, no entourage. He wore a gray hoodie and carried a small gift, an old metronome, wood-carved, the kind no one used anymore. "It was mine when I was 8, he said. "I thought maybe she'd like something old and steady." He sat on the floor beside Amira, not across from her, not above her, just beside. "You didn't steal our music," he told her. "You translated it." Amira tilted her head. "What does translate mean?" "It means you heard something old, and you made it new." Meanwhile, a storm brewed inside the Silver Lake Festival boardroom. Some donors, thrilled by Amira's viral fame, wanted to brand her. Scholarship offers, PR partnerships, commercial licensing. But some were furious. One longtime sponsor said, "We give this stage to anyone now? What's next? A dishwasher conducting Mozart? The line was leaked online. Within hours, it became a meme. In Harlem, a group of school kids printed shirts that read, "Yes, even dishwashers deserve Mozart." In the chaos, one person remained oddly silent. Amira. When Sophie Grant, the journalist who first filmed her, finally reached her in person, she asked gently, "Do you want to say anything to the world? They're listening." Amira thought a long while, then answered quietly, "Tell them, music is where I feel the most safe, and I don't want to be famous. I want to be useful." But the storm wasn't just public. It was personal. Clara received a letter from their landlord. The church storage room they'd been allowed to stay in temporarily would be cleared within 30 days. The church was being sold to developers. The family who had spent a lifetime cleaning up after others was now being swept aside. That night, Harold Evans was well enough to walk again. Slowly, with a cane, he made his way to Clara's apartment. He found Amira sitting at the small fold-out table, scribbling notes on scraps of paper. "What are you working on, little one?" he asked. "A song, for a place with no home, so that the people feel like they still belong." Harold nodded slowly. "You're writing Sanctuary, with sound." Meanwhile, deep in a conservatory office at Juilliard, a quiet war was unfolding. One professor had seen the video. He sent it to the dean. The dean watched it 5 times. Then he said, "She doesn't need us yet, but one day, we may need her." And in the deepest part of the night, Amira dreamt. Not of fame, not of applause, not even of her mother. She dreamt of children, in broken places, sitting in circles, eyes closed, tapping the air. Each of them holding a silent melody they hadn't yet dared to share. "Let the child play, or I walk." And suddenly, the gatekeepers found themselves outside the gate. 2 weeks had passed. The festival was over. The stages were taken down. The food stalls packed up. The spotlights dimmed. But Amira's name hadn't left the world. Instead, it had grown louder, not like a trumpet blaring. No, like a distant hymn, passed from ear to ear, from living room to living room, from the heart of one old jazz musician to another teacher, to another grandmother, to another child. She had become a story. And stories don't fade. They multiply. Daniel Cross returned to the music scene, slightly thinner, moving slower, but with more fire than ever. He sat on a podcast and said, "There are 2 kinds of musicians, the ones who learn the rules and the ones who break them because they've already lived them." Amira's both. Offers continued to pour in. A national tour with the Arrows, interviews with legacy magazines, a scholarship offer from a prestigious conservatory in New York, starting at age 9. But Amira didn't accept anything. Not yet. Not until she met one person. It happened at the edge of a hotel lobby in San Francisco. Amira, Clara, and Mr. Harold had traveled there for a short music showcase featuring youth musicians. After the performance, as they were quietly packing up, a woman in black approached, Sophia Vance, a name that once opened doors, now a board member of the Silver Lake Festival. "Amira," she said softly, "the sponsors would like to invite you back. Next year, headliner, main stage, opening night." Clara froze. Amira looked up. Her voice was calm. "Under one condition." The woman blinked. "I'm sorry?" "3 conditions," Amira corrected. Now even Harold sat forward, cane in hand. "First," Amira said, "there has to be a music fund. For kids like me, who don't have pianos, who don't have teachers. It should be free. And it should have real instruments, not broken ones." Sophia hesitated. That would take coordination, approvals. It's not that simple. It's not that expensive either, said Harold, voice cool. You raised $400,000 last year for stage lighting. Second, Amira continued, Mr. Harold should be listed as a teacher, a real one. He taught me everything. Sophia glanced awkwardly at Harold. We don't normally list non-credentialed instructors on faculty roles. Then change the rules, Clara said, arms folded. Or find a way to sleep knowing you rejected a man who brought music back to a girl who had no light. Third, Amira said, voice steady. My grandma. She's not a janitor. She's a worker. She deserves a badge like everyone else. A name tag, a uniform that fits, and a seat in the front row. Sophia didn't speak for a long while. You're just a child. Amira nodded. Yes, and I've had to carry silence heavier than most adults. Then she stood. No fund, no Harold, no grandma, then no piano. The story spread. Within days, it was headline news. 8-year-old prodigy sets conditions for return. Janitor's granddaughter issues ultimatum to festival board. The child who said no. And the public did not take it lightly. Thousands signed a second petition. Old musicians wrote op-eds in major papers. Students from Juilliard sent a letter to the Silver Lake board titled, We Stand with Amira. One line stood out. If a child from nowhere can demand equity, what's stopping the rest of us? Back at the church apartment, Amira watched Clara pace the floor. Baby, maybe this is too much. You've already played. You've already won. Amira shook her head. It's not about me anymore. It's about the kids watching from the dark, like I used to. Then, in the middle of the noise, came the unexpected. Victor Hale, silent until now, finally broke. He called into a national live radio show. His voice was quiet, clear, older somehow. I was wrong, he said. I forgot that music doesn't care who your parents are. That little girl showed more truth in 5 minutes than I have in years of touring. And if she won't play again unless she's allowed to lift others, then I'll follow her. It was the final push. The board folded. Every condition was accepted. The Light We Play Fund was established with $1 million in seed donations. Harold Evans was officially listed as a guest faculty mentor. Clara Lewis was made a full-time staff member with benefits and uniform privileges. A front row seat was permanently reserved under her name. When Sophia called again, her voice was different. You'll have the opening slot. 40 minutes. Play whatever you want. I will, Amira replied. But I won't play alone. The next morning she called Sophie Grant, the journalist, and made one final request. I want to find other kids, from kitchens, from farms, from shelters. Bring them. I want them to sit beside me next time. And so, the little girl who once whispered music into the dark now spoke in full light, and asked not for a spotlight but a circle, a place where others could come in, sit down, and play. She didn't ask for a stage. She asked for a school. The lights were ready. The contract was signed. The press was watching. But Amira Lewis had no intention of just performing. The world thought this was a return, a comeback. But for Amira, it was a negotiation, not of power, but of purpose. 3 months had passed since the night she stunned the festival. In that time, she had turned down 7 television appearances, refused 2 book deals, and politely declined a lucrative endorsement from a piano manufacturer. I don't want to sell pianos, she had said. I want kids to have them. She had spent those months walking, not through studios or red carpets, but through basements, shelters, migrant housing centers, and farm towns. With her notebook under one arm and a battered digital recorder in the other, she listened to children who had never been asked to sing. One boy in Fresno showed her how he made drums out of old tin cans. A girl in El Paso had memorized violin fingerings by using colored rubber bands. A teenager in Detroit had built a keyboard from cardboard and a downloaded app. Everywhere she went, Amira listened, scribbled, recorded, and gently asked the same question. If I found a way, would you come and play? By the time the Silver Lake Festival returned, Amira had gathered 17 names, 17 children. Some were farmers' sons. Some were daughters of night shift cooks. A few had no homes at all. None had ever been on a stage. Amira submitted a list of demands to the board. I will return, and I will play the opening performance, but only if these 17 children are allowed to perform with me. No audition, no cuts. They don't have to be perfect. They just have to be heard. The board was hesitant. The PR team panicked. One sponsor outright threatened to pull funding. She wants to put a farm choir on $1 million stage? Amira's answer was simple. I already said no once. I'm not afraid to do it again. Behind her calm voice, the internet surged again. Us Let Them Play began trending. Retired musicians shared footage of their first broken instruments. Teachers posted about students who practiced on desks. Single mothers uploaded videos of toddlers singing lullabies in laundromats. The message grew. Talent isn't found, it's freed. And then, in a move no one expected, Isabella Cruz, jazz legend national icon, posted a video. She sat at her piano, played one aching minor chord, and said into the camera, Amira Lewis asked for one thing, not to shine alone. That's not a performance, that's a revolution. The festival board caved. 17 names were approved. 17 children arrived by van, bus, train, even bike. For some, it was their first time leaving their county. For others, their first time sleeping in a hotel bed. They arrived with nerves, tattered sheet music, old instruments. They arrived holding on to Amira's voice like it was a rope pulling them forward. In the days before the show, Amira rehearsed not like a conductor, but like a sister. She sat beside each child, showed them how to breathe through fear, how to play even if their fingers trembled, how to stand tall even if their shoes didn't fit. One boy cried, I'm not good enough. Amira knelt beside him. You are enough. That's why we're here. The stage was reconfigured. No spotlight, no center. Instead, 17 chairs in a wide circle and Amira's piano at the very edge, just like she wanted. When the audience entered that evening, they saw no velvet ropes. Instead, handwritten programs on recycled paper with this message inside. Tonight is not about perfection. Tonight is about return, of sound, of dignity, of children who were never meant to be silent. Victor Hale watched from the wings, not with resentment, with reverence. He leaned toward Clara, who sat proudly in the front row, wearing a pressed uniform and polished shoes. She's remaking this place. Clara smiled. She's remaking more than that. The children walked on stage, one by one, not in step, not in sync, but in belief. When Amira appeared last, she didn't bow. She walked straight to her piano, turned to the circle, and nodded. And then they began. The music wasn't smooth. It was raw, a little off in places. One violin string snapped mid-note. Someone dropped a triangle, but no one laughed. Because what emerged wasn't polish. It was truth. The children played like they were unlocking doors inside themselves. Some closed their eyes, some cried as they sang, and Amira, quietly, wove her piano into their voices like thread into a tapestry. She didn't lead. She lifted. And the audience, thousands of them, sat frozen, listening to 17 stories told in chords, in breaths, in bravery. At the end of the final song, Amira stood and whispered into the microphone, "This isn't the end of something. This is the start of the school we never had." The room erupted, not in thunderous cheers, but in people standing, slowly, quietly, as if they had seen something holy. By morning, Clara's phone was ringing again, but not for endorsements, for enrollment. Hundreds of parents and teachers and workers wrote to the new music fund, "My child wants to play too. I have a garage we can use. I can't offer much, but I have time." The Light We Play Fund expanded within a week. What began as a scholarship became a network. Of old instruments, donated rehearsal spaces, retired musicians teaching in neighborhoods where music had once been extinguished. And Amira? She went back to school, her math homework unfinished, her shoes still scuffed, but her smile, wide, her fingers, ready, her purpose, clear. They had asked her to perform. She had built a door. Then she held it open and let everyone in. She walked on stage like a candle into a storm, and somehow, the storm quieted. The invitation came in an envelope made of heavy ivory paper, sealed with a gold crest. No email, no press release, just 7 words, handwritten in graceful cursive. "Would you play with me, child? I see." It was signed, Isabella Cruz, jazz icon, living legend, keeper of America's golden age of soul. A woman whose voice had once silenced riots, whose piano had opened peace talks, whose hands, now trembling with age, had not touched a stage in almost a decade. And now she had invited Amira to perform with her, live, on national television, the night of music and memory, a once-a-year broadcast watched by millions across the country. Clara read the letter twice, then again. "Are you sure you're ready, baby?" she asked. Amira didn't hesitate. "I'm not playing for millions. I'm playing for one person at a time. That's what Mr. Harold taught me." The day of the concert arrived like a thundercloud. The venue, the Beacon Theater, New York City. Seats, 2,094. Viewers, 42 million, expected. Backstage, Amira sat beside Isabella Cruz for the first time. The woman was smaller than Amira imagined, frail, elegant, wrapped in velvet, her fingers stained with time and grief. Her husband, also a jazz musician, had died just 6 months prior. She hadn't spoken publicly since. Isabella turned to the child beside her. "You know why I asked you here?" she asked. Amira shook her head. "Because you remind me of the girl I used to be, before they taught me to be afraid." They would close the evening together. 2 pianos side by side, one seasoned by decades, one only just beginning. The stage manager called out, "2 minutes." The lights dimmed. The nation leaned forward. Harold, watching from the hospital, whispered to the nurse, "If you hear something break inside you tonight, let it. That's how music makes room." Amira walked out first. Alone. No smile, no wave. Just the same small, focused steps she took that very first night in Silver Lake, when she was just a cleaner's granddaughter with a melody in her pocket. She sat at her piano, took a breath, and began. The piece was unnamed, but it had been born from the sound of broomsticks in empty halls, from the rhythm of Clara's footsteps echoing through tiled floors at night, from the whisper of Harold's cane tapping in time with her heartbeat. It was the sound of someone learning to belong. Her right hand played a melody soft as a promise. Her left followed, hesitant at first, then bold. Minor chords swelled like distant thunder, then shifted, unexpectedly, into quiet gospel. Not church music, but something older, like the song a mother hums while cleaning a child's face. When Isabella Cruz entered, the room caught its breath. She didn't walk. She glided. And without speaking, she sat at the second piano. Together they began a call and response. Isabella played something ancient. Amira answered with something new. And like two rivers meeting in open water, they didn't collide. They completed each other. One jazz critic would later write, "It wasn't a duet. It was a dialogue across generations. A young girl from nowhere and a queen of everywhere, speaking the same language with different accents." The final minutes of the piece slowed. Amira leaned forward, eyes closed, hands still, letting the silence speak. Then with a whisper of a chord, she ended. No flourish, no bow, just two pianos and stillness. The room exploded. Standing ovation, reporters in tears, musicians embracing strangers. But Amira didn't stay for it. She turned to Isabella, bowed her head, and whispered, "Thank you for sharing your stage." Isabella smiled. "It was never mine, just borrowed. Now it's yours to lend." That night, social media overflowed. Catch Cruz and Lewis, our legacy and light, has she played us open. But Amira didn't check her phone. She sat backstage, head resting on Clara's shoulder. Clara ran her fingers through Amira's curls and said softly, "You burned like a flame out there." Amira shook her head. "Not burned, Grandma. I just lit a path." The next day, Isabella Cruz announced the creation of the Amira Lewis Fellowship, a grant for children under 12 who demonstrate not just technical ability, but a deep emotional fluency. The first recipients included a shoeshine boy from Atlanta, a girl who played cello in a refugee camp in Idaho, and a blind harmonica player from Kentucky. Amira went home, not to silence, but to new songs. A younger boy from her town now came to her with a flute made of PVC pipe. Clara helped set up folding chairs in the park every Friday for open jam sessions. Harold, stronger now, tapped rhythms on his wooden cane, and sometimes said, "Play that last part again. I think Heaven missed it the first time." She had stood on the biggest stage in the country, but it wasn't the size of the crowd that mattered. It was the size of the space she left behind for others. She didn't play to impress. She played to invite. And the fire she lit didn't burn the house down. It warmed it. She did not stay in the spotlight. She carried it home and left the door open. The morning after the broadcast, the sun rose gently over Silver Lake. Not the Silver Lake of golden stages and music festivals, but the quiet one. The cracked sidewalks, the trailer homes, the faded diner where Clara used to mop the floor before dawn. And now, just outside that diner, taped to the front window, was a handwritten note. Piano lessons. Free. Tuesdays and Thursdays. Bring your hands. We'll do the rest. A.L. Amira had returned, not as a guest, but as a gardener. And her first seed was this, a borrowed upright piano, old, chipped, donated from a church in Modesto. It stood inside a retired garage, now swept clean, where the floor still smelled of oil and dust. Clara had painted the walls pale yellow. Harold had built shelves for music books. The kids came slowly at first, 1, then 3, then 7. By summer's end, there were 22. They came with empty hands and full hearts. Some couldn't read music, some couldn't read at all. But they could listen, and hum, and tap, and hope. Amira taught the way Harold had taught her, gently, slowly, as if every note was a way home. One day a mother asked her, "Don't you miss the big stages?" Amira smiled. This is the big stage. She wasn't being humble. She was telling the truth. The Light We Play Fund had grown. What began as a whisper now had roots. 4 satellite music rooms in farm towns across California. Partnerships with food banks and shelters. Mobile instruments lent like library books. Isabella Cruz visited once a month. She no longer performed, but she listened. And sometimes she sang lullabies with the youngest children, her voice a silk thread from another time. And one evening, in the soft dusk of October, Amira received a letter. Not from a sponsor, not from a reporter. From the mother of a boy who hadn't spoken in 3 years. It read, "My son played your piano yesterday. He only knew 1 note, but when he hit it, he smiled. It was the first smile I've seen in months. Thank you for finding his voice." Amira folded the letter carefully, placed it in her notebook, the one that once held dream melodies and piano sketches. Now it held stories. Clara aged slowly, gracefully. She was now the community manager of the center. People no longer called her the janitor. They called her Mrs. Lewis. She wore her old uniform sometimes, not because she had to, but because she liked remembering how far they'd come. Harold passed away in early spring. He went quietly. A nurse found him with his headphones in, listening to Amira's very first recording, the untitled piece she had written for her mother. Beside his hand were 3 notes, written shakily in pencil. She found it. She kept it. She gave it away. At his memorial, Amira didn't speak. She played, a soft, spacious melody. No words, just silence between each note, like the space Harold had always left for her to find her own way. The music never left after that. Not from her fingers, not from the classroom, not from the children she taught. It echoed in laughter, in mistakes, in second tries, in the sound of someone brave enough to start again. Amira never chased fame. When offered another TV special, she said, "There's a line of kids outside. They've been waiting to play." When offered a Juilliard audition, she replied, "One day, but first, I want to teach 12 more songs." When asked for a quote for a magazine, she simply said, "There's nothing louder than kindness." Years passed. The garage school turned into a full-fledged center. The old piano was kept near the entrance, keys still chipped. Amira grew. So did her students. One day, a boy named Leo, once too shy to speak, was accepted into a youth orchestra. Another, Josie, began composing songs on her lunch breaks and performed them at nursing homes. They called Amira Miss A, but to each other they whispered what they really thought she was, the one who turned silence into sound. And every Friday night, before closing the lights, Amira would sit alone at the old piano. She didn't play a concert. She didn't rehearse. She just listened. To the ghosts, to the echoes, to the truth that had carried her from the dark into the day. Sometimes she played just 1 note, like a whisper, like a promise. Then she would nod, close the lid, and whisper, "Keep playing." The dawn always broke after that, not suddenly, but softly, like a girl walking back into the world. Holding the light. Thank you, truly, thank you for staying until the very end. Not everyone chooses to walk beside an unknown little girl, to sit with her long enough and journey through every note, every bruise, every quiet dream. Amira Lewis may be a character in a story, but outside this tale, she exists in thousands of unnamed children. Children tapping on tabletops, on air, on their own hearts, waiting for someone to listen. And if you've listened, if your eyes have welled up, if your smile has returned because of songs that had no title, then this story is no longer fiction. It lives in you. Thank you for believing that talent doesn't choose wealth, for sitting still with a child who had no stage, and for letting your heart echo back the music of kindness. Please don't let the story stop here. If you can, open a door for someone, even if it's just an old chair, a dusty instrument, or a quiet whisper. You can play. Go ahead. Because maybe you are the Harold. You are the Clara. You are the first one to believe in a melody not yet written. With all my heart, the storyteller.